Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Ruttamaśloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna. Reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto-3, Chapter 27, Understanding Material Nature. So here we have the discussion. The first section is up to text 5. So we come to text 5, important verse. We'll recite this. Atha eva shanai chittam
अतएव शनैश्चित्तम्
प्रसक्तम् असतां पथि
प्रसक्तम्
भक्तियोगेन तीव्रेण
भक्तियोगेन
विरक्त्या च नयं वशे
विरक्त्या च नयेद्वशम्. It is the duty of every conditioned soul to engage his polluted consciousness, which is now attached to material enjoyment, in very serious devotional service with detachment. Thus his mind and consciousness will be under full control. Purport. The process of liberation is very nicely explained in this verse. The cause of one's becoming conditioned by material nature is his thinking himself the enjoyer, the proprietor, or the friend of all living entities. This false thinking is a result of contemplation on sense enjoyment. When one thinks that he is the best friend of his countrymen, to society, or to humanity, and he engages in various nationalistic, philanthropic, and altruistic activities, all that is just so much concentration on sense gratification. The so called national leader or humanist does not serve everyone. He serves his senses only. That is a fact. But the conditioned soul cannot understand this because he is bewildered by the spell of material nature. It is therefore recommended in this verse that one engage very seriously in the devotional service of the Lord. This means that one should not think that he is the proprietor, benefactor, friend, or enjoyer. He should always be cognizant that the real enjoyer is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the basic principle of bhakti-yoga. One must be firmly convinced of these three principles. One should always think that Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend. Not only should he understand these principles himself, but he should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. As soon as one engages in such serious devotional service of the Lord, naturally, the propensity to falsely claim lordship over material nature disappears. That detachment is called vairagya. Instead of being absorbed in so-called material lordship, one engages in Krishna consciousness, that is control of consciousness. The yoga process necessitates controlling the senses. Yoga indriya samyamaha. Since the senses are always active, their activities should be engaged in devotional service. One cannot stop their activities. If one wants to artificially stop the activities of the senses, his attempt will be a failure. Even the great yogi Vishwamitra who was trying to control his senses by the yoga process, fell victim to the beauty of Menaka. There are many such instances. Unless one's mind and consciousness are fully engaged in devotional service, there is always the opportunity for the mind to become occupied with desires for sense gratification. One particular point mentioned in this verse is very significant. It is said here, prasaktam asatam pathi. The mind is always attracted by asat, the temporary, material existence. Because we have been associated with material nature since time immemorial, we have become accustomed to our attachment to this temporary material nature. The mind has to be fixed at the eternal lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Savai manaha Krishna padarvindyo. One has to fix the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. Then everything will be very nice. Thus, the seriousness of bhakti yoga is stressed in this verse. Hare Krishna.
Further, Kapila Muni says that therefore it is the duty of every conditioned soul, mark the word duty, is to engage his polluted consciousness, prasaktam asatam pathi, which is now attached to the material enjoyment. Now, where to engage that? In very serious devotional service. Bhakti yogena tivrena. Look at these words coming again and again. Bhakti yogena tivrena. Right? Tivrena, intense devotional service. Thus, the mind and consciousness will be under full control. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, the process of liberation is very nicely explained here. Currently, the conditioned soul is conditioned. The soul is conditioned. Why? Because he's falsely thinking he's the enjoyer. And that vikara has come here and he wants to show his kartutva in relationship with matter, and that is his conditioning. He wants to become the leader. He wants to become the proprietor, benefactor, friend, and enjoyer of the material world. Or he wants to say, I am God. I'm a small God. Slowly I will become big God. And when this conditioning, the last snare of this conditioning, that I am the ultimate Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? That's why. So most of the activities performed by the conditioned soul, they are in the modes of material nature. Some activities are very attractive because they are in the mode of sattva guna, but still to the degree one thinks one is the doer, correct? Karta ahamiti manyate, ahankara vimudhatma. And this is not only for the activities in the passion or ignorance, which are naturally, which may appear naturally a little more devastating. Even the activities in the mode of goodness, if they are performed as if I am the doer, karta ahamiti manyate, this is also ahankara vimudhatma. So again, we have discussed this multiple times. It is not that we don't have to become an altruist. It's not that we cannot be a philanthropist. But one should have a very clear identity that I am servant of the Supreme Lord and I am doing this on behalf of the Supreme. Right? So this is very important. Otherwise, there is binding. Srila Prabhupada quotes that these three principles, Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, Surudam Sarvabhutanam, Jnatva Mam Shantim Richati. In fact, and when you understand these three principles, that the Lord is the proprietor, Lord is the master, and the Lord is the ultimate friend of all living entities, then one can actually get real peace. Like yesterday, I was talking to one devotee, and he was feeling so guilty about being even slightly rich. And then he was saying that, no, Prabhuji, when I see around, when I take my car to my office, I feel that, one person is driving. So there is a slight tinge of, I am the doer and mode of goodness getting excessively prominent. And therefore, that what happens is one thinks, so this, I am the doer may come in different aspects. It may come as a pride, it may come as a guilt also. So one has to be very careful. Prabhupada says further, but this propensity of material attachment has to be diverted towards the Supreme Lord. And thus one should engage one's mind completely in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You cannot directly engage the mind. Beginning of engagement of the mind begins with engaging the senses. And therefore, yoga indriya sanyamya. Senses should always be engaged. Senses are always active, right? Bhagavad Gita says this, right? Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtanti akarmakrit. Nahi kaschit kshanamapi, not even for one moment, the soul can be inactive. So the artificial imposition of inactivity will never last. If the soul is not engaged in spiritual activity, if the soul is not engaged, the senses are not engaged in spiritual engagement, you cannot artificially stop. Just like a child, Prabhupada gives example, the mischievous child is there, and then you just tightly, you put the child and some cloth around him and tightly wrap the child around. But the purpose is not to wrap the child, to stop the mischievous activity. Purpose is to engage the child in useful activities, meaningful activities. Similarly, Prabhupada says the senses cannot be stopped. Those big people who try to artificially stop the senses, they have fallen down. And Prabhupada gives example of Vishwamitra. He wanted to artificially control the senses by yoga process, fell down to Menaka. There is Saubhari Muni. He wanted to artificially control the senses, fell down to fish. And then there are scores of such examples where the senses cannot be artificially stopped. But when the senses are engaged in devotional service, Prabhupada says, when one's mind and consciousness are fully engaged in devotional service, there is always opportunity for the mind to become occupied, with the thoughts of Krishna. Otherwise, they will be occupied with thoughts of sense gratification. Prabhupada says one particular point is very important here. Prasaktam asatam patihi. Mind is naturally flowing towards, the asatam pati. Just like, our scrolling behavior on the screen. Naturally, you flow towards certain websites. By the time, you are aware, it becomes so automatic and so patternized. You just open the laptop, you go to click on the Chrome browser, you open the website, you are absorbed in the website, and then you realize, Arey Bapre, I was reading this website, or whatever, this Twitter or Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever it is, that one is very naturally. So similarly, the mind naturally flows towards the objects of sense gratification. Prasaktam asatam pati. And therefore, the mind has to be controlled and bring back. That's what Bhagavad Gita says, correct? Niyam metyat. That, yato nischalati mana chanchalamastheram. That whenever the mind flows, one has to forcibly bring back towards Krishna. Initially, it is endeavor, savai mana Krishna padaravindayor, but slowly that endeavor will turn into the natural propensity of the mind. Text 6. Yamadi yogapathe abhyasan shraddhayanvitah mai bhavena satyena matkatha shravanena cha. Translation.
Translation: one has to become faithful by practicing the controlling process of the yoga system and must elevate himself to the platform of unalloyed devotional service by chanting and hearing about me. Purport: yoga is practiced in 8 different stages: yamaha, niyama, asana, pranayam, pratadhyara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Yama and niyama mean practicing the controlling process by following strict regulations. And asana refers to the sitting postures. These help raise one to the standard of faithfulness in devotional service. The practice of yoga by physical exercise is not the ultimate goal. The real end is to concentrate and to control the mind and train oneself to be situated in faithful devotional service. Bhavena or bhava is a very important factor in the practice of yoga or in any spiritual process. Bhava is explained in Bhagavad Gita 10.8. Buddha bhava samanvitaha. One should be absorbed in the thought of love of Krishna. When one knows that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the source of everything and that everything emanates from him, aham sarvasya prabhavaha, then one understands the Vedanta aphorism, janmade asya yataha, that is the original source of everything, and then he can become absorbed in bhava, or the preliminary stage of love of Godhead. Rupa Goswami explains very nicely in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu how this bhava or preliminary stage of love of God is achieved. He states that one first of all has to become faithful. Shraddhaya Shraddhayana Vitaha. Faith is attained by controlling the senses, either by yoga practice, following the rules and regulations, and practicing the sitting postures, or by engaging directly in bhakti-yoga, as recommended in the previous verse. Of the 9 different items of bhakti-yoga, the first and foremost is to chant and hear about the Lord. That is also mentioned here. Mata katha shravanena cha. One may come to the standard of faithfulness by following the rules and regulations of the yoga system, and the same goal can be achieved simply by chanting and hearing about the transcendental activities of the Lord. The word cha is significant. Bhakti yoga is direct and the other process is indirect. But even if the indirect process is taken, there is no success unless one comes fully to the direct process of hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. Therefore, the word satyena is used here. In this connection, Swami Sridhara comments that satyena means nishapaktena, without a duplicity. The impersonates are full of duplicity. Sometimes they pretend to execute devotional service, but the ultimate idea is to become one with the Supreme. This is duplicity, kapata. The Bhagavatam does not allow this duplicity. In the beginning of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it is clearly stated, Paramo Nirmatsartanam. This treatise, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, is meant for those who are completely free from envy. The same point is again stressed here. Unless one is completely faithful to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engages himself in the process of hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, there is no possibility for liberation. Hare Krishna.
Now the Supreme Lord is giving the process. Yamadhibhir yoga pathair. One has to become faithful by practicing yama, niyama, and asana, the process of Ashtanga Yoga, and thus elevate himself to the platform of unalloyed devotional service by Mai Bhavena Satyena Mat Katha Shravanena Cha, by chanting and hearing about me. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the Ashtanga Yoga process consists of Yama, Niyama, Asana, Ityadi. And the first 3 items, Yama, Niyama, and Asana, they are very highly required to develop the basic preliminary progress in transcendental path, that is Adho Shraddha. So this is, this. And then Prabhupada explains the word Bhava. So what is Bhava? Bhava is Buddha Bhava Samanvitaha. Bhava means one should be absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna. Right? One should be absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. And when one begins to understand how the Lord is source of everything, then one will begin to absorb in the thoughts of Krishna. And entire 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, is describing about how to get absorbed in the Supreme Lord, that Bhava. Rupa Goswami explains Bhava as preliminary stage of Prema, the love of Godhead. Correct. And the first stage is Adho Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, Nishtha. And then, this is how the progress is. The first step is Adho Shraddha. Now here the Shraddha, while the Shraddha is obtained by controlling senses, the yoga process and other things, the same Shraddha can be obtained by hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mat Katha Shravanena Cha. Right. The same goal is achieved. What is the difference? The difference is, by the process of devotional service, the Shraddha obtained by the process of devotional service is very deep-rooted faith. Whereas the Shraddha obtained by the faith obtained by the mechanical process of Ashtanga Yoga is quite tottering. And there is always a chance that such a yogi may backtrack, as we have seen the examples of Vishwamitra and Saubhari. Right. One process is direct, Bhakti Yoga. Other process is indirect. And therefore, Prabhupada says, the word cha is very important, because whatever with great endeavor one will attain in the process of Ashtanga Yoga, one will very easily attain in the process of devotional service as a byproduct. Right. So just imagine, you are attaining something as the ultimate goal with great endeavor, and some other thing that you are doing, you are attaining the same thing as a byproduct. It's like, you go to some IIT JEE class and they say that if you do our class for 4 years, right, from 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, we will give you admission in, most likely you will get admission in IIT or you will get in NIT. And then there is other advertisement. It says that come have a pizza with us, and you just buy one pizza, you get one IIT admission free. And you are wondering, you are getting this point. So what is attained by great endeavor by impersonalists is attained as a byproduct by bhakti yogi. And therefore the word cha is very important, but there has to be element of satya. Sridhar Swami, Srila Prabhupada quotes Sridhar Swami here. Sridhar Swami is the first commentator on Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And Sridhar Swami says, Satyana means without duplicity. Impersonalists, they are full of duplicity. Why? Because sometimes they make a show of devotional service, but that show of devotional service, their ultimate desire is to become one with the Supreme. Right? And this is the greatest poison that they have. They are doing Ram Bhakti, Ram Bhakti, Ram Bhakti. Ultimately, I am only Ram. Ultimately, they want to themselves become Ram. And this is this is the great envy, the last snare of Maya. And this is asatya. Prabhupada calls this as kapata. This is the duplicity. Bhagavatam has no place for such duplicity. Paramo nirmatsaranam satam. The first qualification of Bhagavatam is one has to be nirmatsara. Nirmatsara means one has to be without envy. And that envy begins in the living entity by first envying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ichchadvesha samuthena. Dvandva mohena bharata. Right? That envy that we see in our life is basically, the root of that envy is somewhere we have envied the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, the bhakti has to be satyena. Text 7. Sarvabhuta samatvena nirvairena aprasangataha brahmacharyena maunena swadharmena baliyasa. Translation.
In executing devotional service, one has to see every living entity equally, without enmity towards anyone, yet without intimate connection with anyone. One has to observe celibacy, be grave, and execute his eternal activities, offering the result to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport: a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead who seriously engages in devotional service is equal to all living entities. There are various species of living entities, but a devotee does not see the outward covering. He sees the inner soul inhabiting the body. Because each and every soul is a part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he does not see any difference. That is the vision of a learned devotee. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, a devotee or a learned sage does not see any difference between a learned Brahmana, a dog, an elephant, or a cow, because he knows that the body is outer covering, only that the soul is actually part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. A devotee has no enmity towards any living entity, but that does not mean that he mixes with everyone. That is prohibited. Aprasangataha means not to be in intimate touch with everyone. A devotee is concerned with his execution of devotional service, and he should therefore mix with the devotees only in order to advance his object. He has no business mixing with others, for although he does not see... Oh, sorry, can you scroll up a little bit, please? Thank you. For he does not see anyone as his enemy. His dealings are only with persons who engage in devotional service. A devotee should observe the vow of celibacy. Celibacy does not necessitate that one be absolutely free from sensual life. Satisfaction with one's wife is permitted also under the vow of celibacy. The best policy is to avoid sensual life altogether. That is preferable. Otherwise, a devotee can get married under religious principles and live peacefully with a wife. A devotee should not speak needlessly. A serious devotee has no time to speak of nonsense. He is always busy in Krishna consciousness. Whenever he speaks about Krishna. Mauna means silence. Silence does not mean that one should not speak at all, but that he should not speak of nonsense. He should be very enthusiastic in speaking about Krishna. Another important item described here is swadharmena, or being exclusively occupied in one's eternal occupation, which is to act as the eternal servitor of the Lord, or to act in Krishna consciousness. The next word, baliyasa, means offering the result of all activities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A devotee does not act on his personal account of sense gratification. Whenever he earns, whatever he eats, whatever he does, he offers for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna.
Now, this is the section 6 to 11, where Kapila Muni is explaining attaining liberation by the process of yoga. And what are the qualities, the different qualities the yogi should have, and Srila Prabhupada is giving the devotee should have. Sarva bhuta samatvena nirvairena aprasangataha. A devotee in executing devotional service. Now, how devotional service? Because previous verse already talks about Mai bhavena satyena mat katha shravanena cha. These are all elements of devotional service. And therefore, in such execution, one has to see every living entity equally. Sarva bhuta samatvena. Nirvairena, without enmity. And aprasangataha, without any intimate connection with anyone. One has to observe celibacy, brahmacharyena, maunena, be grave, swadharmena baliyasa. And one should also swadharmena, engaged in one's swadharma activities, the eternal activities, and then offering the results, baliyasa, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, a devotee is naturally ajata shatru. Why? Because by the dint of knowledge, he understands he is not the body and he is the spirit soul. And similarly, every other living entity is also the soul, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Vidya vinaya sampanne, brahmane gavihastini, shuni chaiva shvapake cha panditaha samadarshina. A devotee panditaha is samadarshina, having equal vision. And therefore, he will understand that although Vidya vinaya sampanna brahmana and Chandal, they are the same parts and parcel of the Supreme. They are the soul proper. One is engaged in mode of Sattva-guna, another is engaged in the mode of Tamo-guna. So one will not excessively, hate somebody, or one will understand. Of course, one has to behave accordingly. It is not Prabhupada, when he is explaining this verse in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada writes there. Not that thinking tiger is also a living entity, one will go and embrace the tiger. No, tiger will eat you. But there is this understanding that Sarva Bhuta Samatvena. And the next is there is Nirvairena. And therefore the devotee is Nirvaira. He is Ajata Shatru. He will not pick up the quarrels with anyone. Aprasangataha. Next is that Prabhupada says, although one should see everyone equally, it is not that one has to associate with everyone equally. And there comes the level of Madhyamadhikari, who will be associating with reference to Prema Maitri Krupa Upeksha, Yaha Karoti Sa Madhyamaha. So, Prema, to the devotees of the Lord, he will have loving exchanges, Krupa. Those who are ignorant, he will have mercy in the form of explaining Krishna Katha to them. Prema Maitri, with the equal devotees, he will have Maitri. And Upeksha, he will do Upeksha to those, neglect those who are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? Prema Maitri Krupa Upeksha. This is called as Aprasangena. Prabhupada says, therefore, one should mix with devotees only. What is the meaning of this? Mix with devotees only means, mixing here means sharing one's happiness and distress, association. It is not that a devotee will wall out in the company and he is like moving like a zombie. No, he is normal, natural. He is mixing with everyone in the sense that hi, hello kind of a mixing is there with everyone. But the intimate, what we have, that dadati pratigrahan guhyamaakhyati pritchati principle is only with devotees, right? He has no business mixing with others. So this is from that context. Although he does not see anyone as his enemy, his dealings are only with the persons engaged in devotional service. Next is celibacy. And Prabhupada writes here, even Grihastha is also celibate when he is following the regulative principle of having the sensual life curtailed within the marriage. It's very important. Nowadays, you know, nowadays there are many cases of, people getting trapped by the office love. People are 8 to 10 hours in the office nowadays, and it's a different topic altogether. But one has to be very careful with this, and all these inputs will come from these nasty serials like web series, especially that Dirty Ekta Kapoor kind of series. Those will come in. Some very double meaning conversations they will have, and extreme dirt. Right? What to speak of? The page 3 pornography, page 3 internet, the yellow internet. One has to really save oneself from this. Otherwise, Maya is so strong, one will be kicked out at any point of time. And I know people with one slip in their life, they are struggling throughout their life with AIDS. And material nature is brutal. Material nature is extremely strong and brutal. So the best way to follow this is follow the Vaishnava etiquettes. One should know, one should know one's maryada. One should not try to imitate some Western outlook or Western etiquette or Western style to look a little more modern or something like that. One has to remain in one's maryada and be happy and satisfied with one's own wife. And there is a very nice quote by Chanakya where Chanakya says, one has to be happy with one's wife or husband, one's spouse, one's food, and one's home. You will never have a home which will, exactly fitting in all the requirements of minute details of Vastu, this or that. One will never have a spouse, husband or wife, which is like exactly like this or that. And what you think that, he or she is exactly what you are looking for, just talk to their spouse. And, and you come to know that it is, the perfection exists only in the spiritual world. So this is called as celibacy. Next is prajalpa. Prabhupada writes about maunam. So maunam means not to think. We have that very simple rule of maunam. What is that maunam? Right, kind, and necessary. Right. Of course, one has to speak about the one's varnashram items. One is a teacher, one has to speak about the subject that he's teaching. One is a programmer, one is company. And that is perfectly fine. That comes as a part of maunam. But the unnecessary extravagant talk, especially on politics, this, that, and many other subject matters, and many other subject matter within the devotee circles, which come in the category of upadharma, one has to be very careful. Because one will not remain on the upadharma discussion for a long time. One has to go down to material. Aruya Krishnena Parampadam Patanti Adho Anadrita Yushmadangraya. There are many groups of devotees who start discussing so many wider aspects, thinking that we are discussing culture, and that's good to a certain extent. But eventually, those discussions becomes extremely materialistic, bringing in materialistic familiarities within the devotees. And this is maunam. Okay. So maunam means, of course, talking about one's varnashram is also part of maunam. Right. And then ultimate maunam is Krishna Katha. And Prabhupada says a devotee, not only practicing Krishna Katha, he is also very enthusiastic to preach as well the message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhupada.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna,
everyone. Hare
Prabhupada. Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada, thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.